Welcome back to Math 103. This is video number 2 on fair division. In the previous video, we worked through a warm-up example of what the fair division problem is, and got some sense of what the issues are. Here's the more official setup. There are several players, usually people, but possibly countries or possibly companies, but there are several players who must divide among themselves an item or several items of value, and we will call those items the goods. They have to make a fair division, and we'll define what we mean by fair. There are many ways of thinking about what fairness means in this context. We're going to focus on one of them. There are two important points we're really going to need to keep in mind throughout this subject. We are only going to be looking at those scenarios in which the players have equally strong, equally valid claims to the goods. So this is unlike the situations we've studied regarding power and apportionment. So when we studied power, we had, for example, districts which had different percentages of the population, and therefore legitimate claims to different percentages of the actual power. Similarly, when we looked at apportionment, we had states with different populations and different percentages of total population, and they were therefore entitled to different percentages of the total number of seats. So we're not looking at that here. We could, and that is part of the larger problem of fair division, but for our purposes, just to keep things relatively simple, we're going to look only at players who have equally strong, equally valid claims to the goods. Furthermore, as we discussed in the first video, each player has his, her, its own assessment of the value of the goods and of each part of the goods. Right? You like the icing, I don't like the icing on that chocolate cake. Here are some useful examples to keep in mind that we'll be coming back to. After 4 terrific years together, college roommates graduate and move on. By the way, if you get out of here in only 4 years, I commend you. And they need to divide their commonly owned items, since no one remembers who owns what. Okay, it happens. Write your name on stuff, that's my advice. Now, it makes no sense at all to take the microwave and cut it into 4 equally sized pieces, and give each roommate 1/4 of a microwave. That is insane. That serves no useful purpose whatsoever. You do not want to do that to your microwave. So instead, they will have to find another method. Maybe one person gets the microwave and someone else gets another item, or maybe they sell the microwave and they split the cash. They're going to have to do something other than cutting the microwave into pieces. Another example, siblings inherit property, and they have to divide it among themselves. Another example, a business partnership is dissolved, and the partners have to divide its assets up among themselves. And yet another example that we'll be coming back to a lot, 2 or more people jointly own a timeshare. And what are they dividing? They're dividing the calendar. They're dividing up time to determine who has access to the property when. Okay, so here it is individual items which are being not so much divided as distributed among the roommates. Here we have property that has to be divided up, here we have other property or assets that have to be divided up, and here we have time that's being divided up. Now in all of these cases, you can see how there will be very serious conflict, or potentially very serious conflict, and we want to have methods, mathematical methods, that are reliable in giving everyone what we call a fair share. We're going to define what fair means, but we want to have methods that will resolve these disputes so that no one is overtly angry with the result. Alright, so we really have to define what this word fair means. Our challenge is to divide the goods among the players to assure that every player is going to get what we call a fair share. Now, the word fair has many connotations, and there are many ways to think about it, and mathematics cannot dictate to you your philosophical notion of fairness. So what we're going to do is focus on one specific notion, make it precise, and follow out its consequences. So we're going to define fair share in the following technical, very specific way. If there are 2 players, then a portion of the goods whose value, according to a specific player, is at least half the total value of the goods, that share is a fair share for that player. Right? So if you're getting all the icing and a little bit of the chocolate part of the chocolate cake, and that's worth half or maybe more than half of the total value of the goods, the total value of the cake, that's a fair share for you. That same chunk of lots of icing and very little chocolate cake would not be a fair share for me. I would not consider that worth at least half the total value of the cake, but you would. So that's a fair share for you, but not for me. Okay? And note the words "at least" here. Maybe what you're getting is worth 70% of the total value of the cake. Good for you! So we're still going to call that a fair share for you. It doesn't have to be exactly half the value, but it does have to be at least half the value. So that's for 2 players. What about 3 players? Well, a portion of the goods whose value, according to a specific player, is at least a third of the total value of the goods is a fair share for that player. So player number 1 should get at least a third of what the whole cake is worth to player 1. Player number 2 should get at least a third of the total value of the cake according to player 2. And player 3 should be getting at least a third of the value of the whole cake according to player 3. Okay, so each one is evaluating according to their own outlook and preferences. So in general, what's going to happen if there are n players, whatever number n is, however many players there are, we're just calling it n. If there are n players, then a portion of the goods whose value according to a specific player is at least 1/n of the total value of the goods is a fair share for that player. If there are 25 players, then each one is entitled to at least 1/25 of the total value. Please go on to the next video.